Hello, everyone, and welcome to the March 18th, 2015 episode of Balls Deep Sports Talk with me, your host, Scotty Ball. I'd like to thank you for tuning in this week, and before we get too far, I will address the elephant in the room. I'm assuming that there is still a digitized vocal effect on my voice as you are listening right now. I do apologize for this. I'm terribly sorry. We are trying to isolate the problem. It is not in production. We have figured that out. It is a post-problem glitch somehow. And both myself and everyone at the studio, at the station, are working on getting the problem solved. And hopefully next week will be the first week where that is no longer an issue. But if you think of it like an old AM radio effect type of thing on it, it grows on you. It has a little bit of charm. Creates a nice little atmosphere, a little environment for the show, and it's not so bad. Doesn't take too long to get used to, but again, I apologize for it, and hopefully it will be taken care of next week, and we're doing everything we can to figure out just how to fix it, and do that as soon as possible for you. And I'd like to take a quick moment to thank everyone who has followed the show on Facebook, followed on Twitter, I should say, and liked Scotty Ball and friended Scotty Ball on Facebook. It is a great way for you to stay in touch with what's going on with me in the show, what we're talking about. And also, if you're ever unable to catch the show at 9 o'clock when it airs, you can always go on to the Twitter or the Facebook accounts and re-listen to the shows via SoundCloud at your convenience, as well as sharing the show with your friends. So again, thanks to those of you who have done that already. If you have not done that already, please follow the show on Twitter at BDST Show. Very simple, at BDST Show on Twitter. And on Facebook, find me, Scotty-Ball. And one last thanks here, as always, to Northern Lights Radio on WNLMradio.com for having the show. All right, lots of sports to talk tonight, so let's get to it. All right, so here on Balls Deep Sports Talk, if you're a new listener or if you've forgotten and just need to be reminded, I like to start every show with a segment I call Balls on Fire. Pretty self-explanatory. I talk about what's got me the most heated, most fired up, whether it be excited, positive, fired up, or a outraged, negative, fired up. And of course this week, what is there for a person to be more heated about in the world of sports than March Madness? That's right. It is time for the NCAA men's and women's basketball tournaments, one of the best postseason spectacles events in all of sports. Heck, it could maybe even be the best postseason in American sports, or American team sports, we should say. I don't know. Maybe that's a deep thought for later this show or some other show. But it's, in my opinion, the second largest sporting event in the United States, behind Super Bowl Sunday, of course. Now, I say that the second biggest sporting event in America is the NCAA tournament, only to the Super Bowl, that is, not because I'm a huge basketball fan, although I'm a pretty big basketball fan, but I say that because it is entertaining and presented in such a unique way that people from outside the sports world, people who are just casual fans or non-fans at all, become interested and pay attention and follow along. I mean, how many people fill out at least one bracket to turn in and try to win some prizes or some money at some point in time during March Madness? Tons of people, entire workforces do this. Entire classrooms do this. And it just has such an amazing way of bringing in an extremely large audience. One that's one that isn't following along and paying very much attention to the season and the product as, up until that postseason point in time. So come March Madness, you've got all these diehard college basketball fans, which, believe me, there's plenty of them. And then you've also got this huge, massive influx of casual and non-fans coming in to to help to fill out their brackets and to watch it play out and see if they win any money. And they've got teams to cheer for, and they're emotionally invested into the games and the outcomes, into what's going on. So now that I say that, maybe it is the legalized gambling element of the NCAA tournament that helps make it as big and successful and popular as it is. However, I think even without that element, it's still an extremely exciting, entertaining watch. Just the structure of the format of the tournament, the way it is, being one and done. Anything can happen. Anybody can lose any game. You get Cinderella miracle teams out of nowhere defeating giants, and that's what's going to happen this year at some point in time. Or it's just going to be everyone playing for second place. You're seeing how far they can get before Kentucky wins the national championship. Because if you haven't followed along with the college basketball season up until this point, you wouldn't know then that Kentucky is 34-0, won their conference championship, they're the SEC champions, and are seeking to become the first team since 1976, since Indiana, the Hoosiers did it in 1976. I believe they're the only team to ever go undefeated and win the NCAA tournament in the same season. Kentucky will attempt to be the second team ever to do that, unless we're counting stuff before the current format of the tournament was instated. Then there are other teams, I believe, that have gone undefeated during the season and won the championship, but only won under the current tournament format. But before I get too much into Kentucky and the other teams in the tournament and who you should be picking in your brackets and who you should be avoiding in your brackets, I do need to discuss one specific balls on fire element to the NCAA tournament. I am on fire, as a lot of people are this time of year who follow the entire college basketball season, in regards to how the NCAA tournament committee assembles this tournament. And now, what I mean by that is not so much having the right teams in the tournament or the wrong teams not in the tournament, because they do a pretty darn good job every year of making sure that the teams who deserve to be in it are in it. What I am referring to is how they go about seeding and placing these teams within the brackets within the tournament. That one who, as I said, follows along throughout the entire college season, you just can't help but wonder about when you see these selections, a lot of these. And it happens just about every year, and this year is no exception. Now, to me, I think the saddest thing about the whole situation is that the system they don't have in place currently, it doesn't work. They consistently get lots of the seeding wrong and lots of the team placement within the brackets wrong year after year. And yet they've got this advanced, almost BCS style ranking system that they use throughout the entire year called the BPI, if you don't know what I'm referring to. And this basically takes into account a team's entire record, the amount of points, how much they won by, how much they lost by, where the game was played at, if it was home or road, what the other team was ranked, how good they are in relation to how good you are, and determining how quality of a win or a loss any game may be. And then you've got the conference tournaments for bubble teams to get in it. That's, to me, that's really what the tournaments are mostly for and should be kept for, the conference tournaments the week leading up to the March Madness. To me, those tournaments need to be primarily, we look at the bubble teams there. If you get a team this year like Virginia, for example, this year, they were a top 4 team pretty much the entire year, top 2 team for almost the entire year. They had a freak loss in their conference tournament, and now suddenly they're a 2 seed in the tournament, having just 3 losses. And as I said, having been a top 4 team the entire season. So right there you've got a classic example of the selection committee, which is the human beings that get involved on the NCAA's behalf in a big closed room and tell us who is all in the tournament and who's playing who, where, and when. Now, if these people would just stick to the information, the concrete evidence that they have at hand that is very accurate and detailed, all they should be there for is to make sure that bubble teams exceptions and seeding errors, mismatches don't occur, they should be there to oversee that the bracket itself and the placement of the teams within the bracket is as fair as possible based off of what the teams have accomplished throughout the season up until that point. That should be their job and their only job. Unfortunately, that is not the first interest that they act in. But let's face it, they wouldn't be the NCAA if they did. But I'll try to give you some examples here about what I'm talking about. Okay, example 1. The tournament, as I would hope you're aware, is broken down into 4 regional brackets, groups, sections, divisions, whatever word you want to use. A Midwest bracket, where the games are played in Midwest cities and states and venues. A West bracket, an East bracket, and a South bracket. All having the tournament games held in different cities and locations in those geographic areas. Now, if the tournament committee likes you for whatever reason, maybe you have a high-profile star player that's going to be in the NBA draft coming soon, maybe you have a lot of school history and have been a good upstanding program who's played by all their rules. Maybe you're a box office draw as far as a university name and team. Whatever their reasoning being for liking someone or not liking someone, if they like a team, they'll put them in their home region. But if they don't, they have no problem shipping a team halfway across the country. When other teams who are as good or arguably not even as good are getting home games, they're having to travel 1,000 miles or so, hundreds of miles at least in some cases, in a lot of cases. But let's take, for example, here's a current example of that in this tournament. You've got number 1 seed Wisconsin. They're playing out on the West Coast. No, that's fine. I understand it's a neutral tournament. You got to play on neutral sites the best you can. Neutrals in quotation marks, air quotation marks. You couldn't see that in Radio Land, but I did it. But if that were fair for all the 1 seeds across the board, then I would have absolutely no problem with it. But let's look at the other 3 number 1 seeds. Kentucky, what region are they in? The Midwest. They basically got home games all the way to the Final Four. We look at the other number 1 seed in the East. We have Villanova. They're an upper northeast East Coast team. Again, pretty much all home games up until the Final Four. And then in the southern region, you've got Duke, who, well, they're fairly down south. It'd be not true south like Texas per se, but they are closer to Florida, Atlanta, Mississippi, that neck of the woods. If you're not familiar with where Duke is, I believe they're in one of the South Carolina, maybe North Carolina, probably North Carolina. That's why that's why they're rivals with North Carolina so much. Maybe I don't know. Somebody look that up for me. I should know that. But anyway, point being, Duke is geographically located on the southern part of the United States, and they are in the South region, given again fairly little travel and relative home games throughout up until the Final Four. So how is it fair then to make the number 1 seed Wisconsin have to go all the way out to California and other such areas to play? When, oh, by the way, the number 2 seed in the West is Arizona. So let's just say Wisconsin at number 1 in the West and Arizona at number 2 in the West don't get upset and meet each other in the Elite 8. You've got the number 1 seed playing a game, who's from Wisconsin, playing a game, I don't know, hundreds, 1,000 or more miles from home, against Arizona, who's going to have basically a home crowd for that entire game. how is that fair for the number 1 seed to basically